I haven't done this many times to stream, but hopefully hi everyone. Hopefully this is already working. Sorry, it looks like it's trying to catch up. It's Angelica Allen here. I'm here with Cristina. Oh yeah, and sorry, I'm just yeah. It's working now, Cristina.
Perfect.
Awesome. I'm here with Cristina Frias. She's the founder of Grabbing Life by the Bag blog. And I'm super excited for her to share her story with us. We have a lot to learn from her. And I am really, really looking forward to our chat. Hi, Cristina. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
I am very good, thank you. So tell us a little bit more about your story. I know that there is so much to say, but you know, how you got here and
How long do we have? No.
yeah.
Well, I mean, I've been battling two autoimmune conditions for many years. One is called Hidradenitis Suppurativa, and that was, I got first symptoms when at the age of 9. Not diagnosed properly till over a decade later. And then I was diagnosed with Crohn's when I was 18, almost 19, 18 years old. But I was suffering with it and not diagnosed for over a year. It was actually almost a year and a half before I was diagnosed with Crohn's disease. Yeah, so it's been a lifelong battle. But I should say more, I mean, it has been a battle and a fight, but it's a lifelong journey.
Yeah.
Because not, you know, even though it's a difficult thing to go through, it definitely brings elements. You can always see some positive elements like perspective of life and things.
Yeah.
And so I don't want to make a huge negative connotation, but not diminish the effort and the struggle that comes with it.
So when you talk, I am losing a little bit the sound here. I'm not so sure why, but what I was going to say is, like, I know that Crohn's is getting a little bit more, you know, well known by, you know, the society now, but that first condition is this hidradenitis suppurative.
Yeah.
Yeah. So how old were you, and what, you know, if you can talk a little bit about that, you know, why do you think, you know, also it took so long for them to diagnose that?
Well, I got the first symptoms, as I mentioned, at the age of 9. And so I was very young, and the type of condition, it's not well known at all. Apparently it is quite common in people, but because due to the nature of the condition, it's very embarrassing. And so a lot of people don't talk about it, which means it doesn't get a lot of airtime. And a lot of people and physicians don't know a lot about it. And so they don't, yeah, it's just a struggle with that condition. And like I mentioned, it's kind of embarrassing. And they talk about like sexy diseases. This is definitely not considered a sexy disease. And so it's really, your immune system is attacking your skin, your hair follicles specifically, and it typically targets certain areas. And you can have different stages of severity on the condition. So when I first got it, it was like different, like almost like an abscess kind of a thing. And it was always in really, like it can come up in different forms. It can come on your hips. It can come into your groin. It can be under your armpit. It could be in several areas, but usually like where sweat glands are.
Yeah.
And it's excruciatingly painful. And so, like I mentioned, it comes in different stages. But anyway, going back, so I was 9 years old and these little, kind of nodes were coming up, and I was embarrassed. I thought I had done something wrong. I thought I was, dirty. I thought, I was a bad person. Like, you're 9 years old, you don't know.
No.
I was even embarrassed to tell my mom, and we're close. And I didn't say anything for a long time. And until she started noticing different like things about me that were changing. So meaning like I would, be more quiet because I was like in pain and I was holding things in, or I would be walking a little bit different because of the pain. And so finally, like, it was a while after that, finally she's like, what's going on? And she kept pressing. I was like, nothing. And then finally, like, I finally said something, and she took me to the doctor. I remember going to multiple doctors because they're like, oh no, it's nothing. Oh no, it's nothing. And I was just in pain all the time. And and so that's sort of how it started.
Wow. And so because, it's like an abscess, they, you go to the doctors and they just think, oh, it's a boil, it's an abscess, but they don't actually diagnose with the, what can they do when, there is a diagnosis?
Well, so that they didn't actually diagnose me properly until like over a decade later. And it was one time when I was in the hospital. So I've been in hospitals, like in and out of the hospital. I can't even count how many times, and sometimes like months that I'd be in there.
And that was all to do with this condition, like you just.
Well, some times that I was in the hospital was this condition. Other times it was Crohn's. Sometimes it was a little bit of both.
Wow.
And so I've had 10 surgeries, some to do with this HS and some to do with Crohn's.
Wow.
And so it was in one of my latter surgeries that I finally got diagnosed properly. And so they kept saying it was like abscesses, it was cystic acne, it was all these different things, and it wasn't what it was. And when they had, I'd been to multiple doctors, and they tried topical creams, and they tried antibiotics, and they tried all this stuff. And I went to a dermatologist, and they gave me this medication called Accutane. And so, so I took Accutane, and I started getting all these side effects. And, I was getting really sick. I was, throwing up and, not eating properly. And I was just feeling really bad, and it wasn't helping the HS. And my mom was just like, "What's that happen?" Went back to the dermatologist. She's like, "No, keep going. You have a stomach bug. You have a stomach flu." And so I kept taking it, and I was like, "Mom, I don't feel good." And she could see like there's something wrong with my kid. And finally it was like, I think it was about 6 or so months. Then my mom goes, like, we went back together, and she's like, she's not taking this anymore.
Yeah.
And so she stopped, she made me stop taking the medication. And then I kept getting, like, I was feeling a little bit better after I stopped taking it, but I kept, like, there was still these symptoms, lingering symptoms. And then, I would get stressed out and whatever. All of a sudden I was just like, I was really severely like in pain. I was throwing up a lot and, going to the bathroom a lot. Yeah. And then I went, I had all this stuff happening, and my stomach was hurting and all this other stuff. I went to the doctor. They're like pressing my stomach, and they're like, and this is like a year after, and they're like, I'm pretty sure you have Crohn's disease. And I'm like, what? Oh. I was like, okay. So I went to go do a bunch of tests, and we were waiting for the tests to come. And at this point, it's like, I couldn't, like, I was very athletic. I couldn't play football or soccer anymore, because I was in so much pain because it affects your joints and all these other things. I couldn't move my arms. I wasn't eating. I had lost like 30 pounds in a month. It was just crazy. And then, so I was constantly going to the bathroom. And
so
then
by pressing your tummy, they can feel that you have Crohn's.
Well, I think it was just my reactions and with my symptoms, and then she felt it. And the thing is the doctor that saw me was a brand new, like she was kind of like a resident doctor. So she was new on the scene. And I think it was like having that
different perspective, like a different
perspective. Yeah. And wanting to be like really engaged with the symptoms and not just like, okay, here's some pills, go. You know, she was really listening to me, taking the time to listen to what was happening. And then she, you know, was pressing on my tummy and stuff. And then she sent me, she's like, you need to take a bunch of tests. But I'm like 99% sure you have Crohn's disease. And first of all, I was like, what the hell is that? I don't even know what that means.
Yeah.
So we started doing Googling and all that. And I went to the hospital. We did a bunch of tests. And then I came back home and it was like 2 nights later, I was like, you know, I would go to the bathroom in the middle of the night and I wouldn't even turn on the lights because it was that how often I would go to the bathroom. Anyway, It was one night and I just happened to look down and it was like really pitch black. And I turned on the light and it was like somebody had slit my wrist and there was just so much blood.
Wow.
And so I didn't, you know, I didn't really want to bug my parents, but I was like, I need to tell them there's something. So I went and I woke up my mom and she's like, we can't wait any longer. We're taking you to the hospital. So we took her to the hospital and it was strange. Like was there lots of people in there and they asked what the problem was and they didn't even let me stay in the waiting room. They're like, we need to take you in right away.
Yeah.
Took me in right away, did a bunch of tests. I was so malnourished. I was so dehydrated because I wasn't keeping anything in. And so they had put all these tubes and injections and all this other stuff. And I remember like they had drawn the curtains and they thought I was asleep. And the doctor came to talk to my mom and was like, oh, Mrs. Frias, thank God you brought your daughter in because 1 more hour, you would have found her dead in bed because she was bleeding to death from inside.
Oh my.
So it was like, that was my very first time. And there's been multiple times because I think you remember some of the stories from before, but that was the very first time where I was like, oh my God, I was that close. I was that close. They were ready for blood transfusions and all this stuff. And that story is just to prove that like, when you know something is wrong, do not wait. Do not listen. Like, you know yourself more than the doctors do, more than anything. If you know you're outside of your feeling your normal body, go back, go.
This so resonates with me. I did have some bleeding before my stage 3 bowel cancer diagnosis. And I remember looking at it and thinking, you know, what can really people do? You know, like, you know, they're not going to stop the world because I have a little bit of bleeding, right? Because I was so caught up in being busy in my own life. And I don't think it was as you know, as much blood as you saw in your case. But I remember that my husband's auntie was here from the UK and she kept watching me and I kept saying, oh, again, I was going to the toilet often. You know, it's one of the symptoms of bowel cancer as well, that you go to the toilet and you don't feel you're emptying your bowels. And she kept saying to me, you need to go to emergency. You need to go to emergency. And I did organize a little party for my daughter on the park. And that day I had gone to bed really tired. I woke up really tired, feeling I couldn't eat anything. And that's when I knew something was really wrong. And when I went into emergency, the same, you know, they reluctantly did a CT and they were like, I cannot even believe that you can walk and talk. So I think that is so important to have those, you know, like to listen to that inner voice when you need to.
Absolutely. And after they finally settled and I was, you know, I was in the hospital that time. I think it was like almost 3 weeks. And I got out and I was starting, you know, little by little starting to feel better. But they put me on medications and I was like immune suppressants. And I was like, it's not helping me. I was getting really aggravated. The doctor was actually close to retirement. He kept saying, it's because you're not taking them right. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And it deterred me from actually, you know, listening to them. I didn't trust them. You know, later on I got, you know, connected with a bunch of doctors that did listen to me, which was great. But yeah, that initial stuff, I'm like, you know, 18 years old. And I'm like, what the heck? They're not listening to me. They think I'm a child and they don't think that I know my body. And it's just, it was aggravating. Years later, they, you know, they're like, well, off the record. And this is the other doctors like later where they actually listen to me. And they're like, yeah, you know, we can't go on the record, but we're like 99% sure the Accutane, which was supposed to be helping the HS, was what triggered my Crohn's.
Yeah, I was going to ask you that question.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
I mean, it
that's
sounds like it is as simple as that, right? Like sounds like it's a really, was it a steroid based medication or?
It was very aggressive. In fact, there was multiple lawsuits against this medication because of the severity of the side effects and what had happened. There was a gentleman apparently in the States that had what has happened to me happened over there, and they won a $25 million lawsuit.
Wow. Yeah.
But in Canada, you don't do that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, you know, I think, you know,
again, back then you were only like a teenager, right? Because you were younger than 18 and you were telling them like, this is not good, you know, like, I don't want to take this. Your mom could see your changes. And, you know, and it's so hard to go against that power that comes with like the white suit, right? It's so hard.
You listen to the doctor. The doctor was like, they know all, and, you know, and they weren't listening to me. And the thing is because I was so naive about it and, you know, young, and they're like, try this. Okay, this is not working. Try this medication. So then I was on this, and it was like, you know, and then I ended up going into infusions, like a chemotherapy type infusion for the Crohn's. And it wasn't helping me. I was on steroids. I was on like all this other stuff. And it was affecting me so poorly that like I had no defense on anything that was happening besides Crohn's. And even the Crohn's, it wasn't helping me. And
was it all immune suppressants medication? Or was it when you went to the infusions or something else?
No, it was chemotherapy. It was like chemotherapy.
Chemotherapy.
It was a biologic. It was Remicade, and they have another one out there called Humira, and they use Remicade for Crohn's and things, but they also started to use Humira. But Humira is also used for like rheumatoid arthritis and other stuff. But essentially, it's killing your immune system. That's what it is. That's what chemotherapy is. It's killing your immune system so that it doesn't have a fight against whatever condition you're having, right? Because an autoimmune condition is your body thinking that something healthy is not healthy in your body, and it attacks it. And it comes out in different forms. That's what diabetes, you know, you know, has to do with your pancreas. Crohn's has to do with your digestive system. And there's a difference between colitis and Crohn's. Crohn's can affect you from your mouth and have mouth ulcers all the way through your esophagus down to your rectum. And so it goes through your whole digestive system with Crohn's. And so, yeah.
And colitis is only in the large intestine.
Yeah, it's just segregated into one section, whereas the Crohn's, it's throughout. It's throughout your, like I mentioned, like through your mouth, you can have mouth sores all the way down into your rectum.
So after you went to those infusions and nothing was working, that's when you decided to kind of take ownership of your health and start doing things differently?
Actually, I had a really large infusion. It was like, I was taking it for a long time and it wasn't working. And I was like feeling really bad. And, I mean, I won't go into too much detail, but I was essentially having all those regular Crohn's symptoms, not being able to move right because it affects your joints as well. Like and then the doctor's like, okay, meet me at the hospital. There's something going on. And I put in a full day of work. And I was like, okay. And I had this gut feeling. I'm like, I'm going to be staying in the hospital for a while. I know it. So I ended up driving home, getting like toothbrush, getting all the stuff. This is not my first rodeo. And I met him at one of the hospitals in Victoria. And that's when I've gone into the emergency room And they brought me in. That, you know, I remember having like huge amount of people in the emergency room, and they just brought me right in, did a couple tests. They're like, we can't wait for the surgeon. So they put me in an ambulance. I felt like I was like on a episode of like Grey's Anatomy or something. They put me in an ambulance with the sirens and everything, and drove me into the other hospital in town, in Victoria. And they had already called over and told them what was happening with me. So the surgeon, the nurses, the operating nurse, all of them were waiting at the hospital in the emergency room. And they had taken me out of the gurney, put me on the other gurney, and were prepping me on the way to the operating room. So I'm like on my back and the lights are going, and I'm like, I'm barely like, I don't know what's happening. It's like,
was this based on a blood test, or like when you mentioned like the doctor called me and said you need to come straight away? What was that based on?
Me telling them, because
your symptoms.
Yeah, and my symptoms, and they knew that, like, they're like, okay, let's try another dose of Remicade. You know, let's try one. And then I would be like, they were really good, at least, of keeping in touch with me. I actually had their personal cell phones, because there was a lot of people. I always called them my team, but I had like a bunch of them that were very invested in my, you know, like my well-being. So, you know, like I said, in the latter years, like I had a really good group of physicians that really wanted to get me better. And so anyway, and it was like, I told them, they're like, hey, what happened with the last infusion? And I told them, they're like, no, there's something else. We can't, that's not helping you. And that's when they went, and thank God I went when I did. And so
what happened on that surgery?
So I went into the operating room, and I came out, and I remember being in the post-op room, and the surgeon was holding my hand and was looking in my eyes, and I was kind of coming out of anesthesia, and he's looking at me, and he goes, Chris, we do not know how you're alive right now. You're my medical miracle. The surgery took longer than we thought. And I was like, well, what happened, right? So they went in laparoscopically to try and remove part of my colon. Well, it was a disaster that they couldn't even do it laparoscopically. They had to cut me open and remove my entire large intestine, because it came out, it was so inflamed, it was the size of football, and it was ready to burst. I would have gone, that was it. Toxins, everything. And so they removed the whole thing. They left a little bit like the rectum, because what they were hoping to do is with having, so I have an ileostomy pouch, which is a replacement on outside of my body, a replacement of the colon. And so what they were hoping to do is, there have been known where the rectum is, you know, it takes a break, and then you can bring in, and they do what's called a J pouch. So they grab the bit of the small intestine and create almost like a little colon and reattach you. And I had this gut feeling. I'm like, no, I have to come to terms with the fact that I'm going to have this bag forever. Wow. I just had this feeling. And so it was like, I was in the hospital for 2 months, and there's a lot of stuff that happened in between there. And fast forward to, I guess it's like 6 years ago now, that they checked to reattach. I was having a little bit of issue with the rectum, and then they found the early stages of cancer. And so they removed my rectum. So I knew, like I said, I had this gut feeling, and so now I have an irreversible ileostomy pouch. So I've had that it's going to come to 11-year anniversary in July.
Wow. How was that coming out of that surgery? Now, I have gone through similar process, because when I went to the emergency surgery, they talked about taking part of my colon and maybe having to open me up completely. They said that they were going to try to do laparoscopy, and if they couldn't, they would open me up, and I would end up with a bag. And I was very lucky that one of the senior surgeons saw my paperwork from home, and he said, I think I can do laparoscopy, because it was my one was close to the rectum. It was on the sigmoid area. But on the other side, I had a lot of like poo packed up. So they were very concerned that if they had to open me up, that would go everywhere and I would die. So for them, it was very important to make that laparoscopy surgery to work. But yeah, and it was a little bit like the same, going to emergency and all of a sudden, going from being a normal person to, hey, you're doing a surgery. It's probably cancer, stage 3. You're going to need 12 months, 12 sessions of chemotherapy, and you might end up with a bag. And you're just like, thinking that this is a movie in front of you and that's not your life, but it is your life. And my surgery, it took a lot longer for them as well. I remember them saying to my poor husband, saying, he said, oh, should I wait around? And they were like, yeah, no, you can go home and, have a shower and, do whatever you need to take because it's going to be a long one. How was that to come out and, have that, bag and, having to come to understanding your new kind of reality?
Well, that's a really good question. And I think I almost was, I would say, numb to everything. My feelings were numb about it. It was like, I was very like realistic about everything, but it was like, it wasn't me. Does that make sense? I don't know if I'm explaining myself well, but it was like, I never kind of dealt with it. Even though I had that instinct that this is forever, I just, it was, I don't know. I don't think I dealt with it. It was just like, okay, what needs to happen? I need to heal. I want to get out of the hospital. I was always very much like, throughout my life, it was like one thing. That's the only way I could cope. I never let it soak in. I had my moments of like, but I never let it soak in because I always felt like, oh my God, if I deal with this and let it soak in, I'm going to be a mess. Can I go on through life if that really sunk in?
Yeah.
And it took me years later, and I was functioning fine, I had my moments, and I definitely was bummed out about stuff, but I was always this positive train.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, okay, what's next?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to try this, and I'm going to try this, and it's no big deal. It's no big deal. It's no big deal. And, like everybody, like people can go through it. And it wasn't until years later till I really let it soak in. It was like, it's a trauma.
Yeah.
And it's funny because I have been to the hospital so many times, and you know how they always say you have, PTSD, and a lot of it's a real thing. And it, it comes in different forms, and everybody has their own, like, I'm not trying to compare to other people on PTSD, but just on my own, like, things trigger me. Like a smell, it'll take me back to that day that I was in the hospital, or, like I go and visit the hospital and I get these sweats of anxiety. Mm-hmm. And so it was a matter of really dealing with it. And I think at the time, the way I compartmentalized everything, that was how I could cope. And I don't think it was necessarily a bad thing, but you kind of, everything has to align for you to be able to deal with the situation.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And each of us, like I said, we'll do whatever we need to do to deal with it at that particular time, isn't it? Like, the same, like as when they told me after surgery, it's definitely stage 3, you're definitely going to need chemotherapy, it's going to be at least 6 months, 12 sessions, I'm very similar, I just had to hold myself together. I had 2 kids, they were very little at the time, 6 and 4 years old. I had to pull myself together to what's next, and until I could deal with that, the whole trauma of being in that situation.
And those 2 times, specifically the first time I was diagnosed with Crohn's, that time, and this time where both times were this, I'm very lucky to be alive. And I'm thinking like, yes, I have the bag and it sucks. It does suck sometimes, but I could be not here anymore. And there's a meaning for me to be here. I wouldn't be, if I had already 2 stints with the end and I'm still alive. There is something I'm supposed to be doing here. There is something good. There's something I have to get out of this. There is something that I have to help.
Definitely.
And that's how I took it, and, it was sort of like, that's what motivated me to continue, like I didn't want to give up when life could have just been gone.
Yeah.
So there's a meaning. So I didn't want to waste it either,
So how, so is that where the blog comes in?
That came years later, but it was always something that I felt like there was something bigger for me, because, we kind of chatted a little bit before, but I wanted to do something with my life. I had this whole different projection of what I wanted to do with my life. And with the condition, with both conditions and fighting both battles, it didn't give me the opportunities that came to me. I could not, I could not accept at that time. Like I had scholarships, I had this, there was a different kind of career I wanted to go into, and it just didn't give it to me. But I felt like there was something more. So that's when all this, it was like, I see. So my calling is actually this.
Yeah.
So
talk us a little bit more about your blog and, like what, how you created and what you talk about. And
so my blog, it's my name, Cristina Noel Frias, and my title is Grabbing Life by the Bag, and you can take all the puns you want from it because
I love it.
All effective. As we just talked about, it's about my Ileostomy bag, but it's also about like, the blog is about life. It's about the baggage that you carry with you, and that can a lot of people can relate to that. And there's different types of baggage that come with you. It's not, it's physical, mental, emotional baggage that you have. It's also, and I have there is traveling, and that's also bringing your bags with you, right? When you travel. So there's that. Yeah. And, there's style and fashion that I love. And I talk about that and how to like manage, still trying to be stylish and how do I do that with a bag? Because a lot of people, think that that's it. Like, how can I look beautiful like that, whether you're clothed or not clothed? I mean, people that have bags still want to look sexy, and they still want to, be a part of everything. And as you should, as everyone should.
Exactly.
And so I talk, I'm going to get into things like that. And like I mentioned, the travel and on the blog too, I create different recipes, because a lot of these things, like we talked a little bit about food and how important that is, with nutrition and with anybody, but especially with people that have conditions, and the importance of that. So yeah, I talk about life, about how to manage life with these things. Also, I'm going to be getting into speaking about, having conditions like these that are invisible to the regular person. But when you start getting, like, how do I manage that with a relationship?
Yeah.
How do I do that when I start talking, like start dating? When do I tell somebody? Guess what? Like, surprise. Like, when does that happen? It's a lot of anxiety with people that have any condition, but people that have like scarring, people that have an ileostomy pouch, people that have, what other conditions that regularly, if you look at me right now, you would never guess.
Yeah.
But those are things, and it causes a lot of people anxiety for that. Like, and they push away the opportunity to have these great relationships. And so that's sort of what I want to get into as well with the blog. So there's a lot of different elements, but really it all comes down to it's living a journey, living a life with things that these obstacles that come up, and what do you put into place? Sorry, I see that the light is coming down.
It is coming out. I know, I can see that.
I'm going to try to turn on the light. Hold on.
Okay. I think that is so important what you've done. I can see you now. That's awesome.
I was like, okay, she's getting darker. And it was.
Is this part of the show? Is it? I think it's so valuable, everything that you've said. You're married now, right? Did you meet your husband after?
No, I'm not married.
Oh, I
No.
thought I thought you were talking about your husband last time that we spoke about.
Well, we're divorced.
Okay, but you were
Yeah.
married.
I was married, yes, but that's also something that I want to tackle in
Yeah.
because that was a very abusive relationship. And so yeah, that's a whole different conversation. But long story short, I was very young when I met him. He was a lot older than me, and because of the stuff that was happening with me, I did not have the ileostomy pouch before I met him, but I did have scarring and stuff from the HS and other things to do with the Crohn's. And I felt like this was the best that I could do, even though I had these like instincts that it wasn't a good, but that abusive nature, it was like, well, that's what I deserve. That's all
Wow.
I can do. I'm less of a person because I have these things happening. And the truth is that is so incorrect in
Yeah.
thinking. But by having my self-esteem so low regarding these things that were happening, and that's why I allowed that relationship to continue, even though I knew it wasn't good for me, even though I had these instincts about it. But I thought that this was the best. This is the only thing that I could do. I have to try to make it work. And so we were together between dating and marriage. I got married young as well. Between dating and marriage, I think we were together for like 13 years.
Wow. Yeah.
And so I finally, I couldn't anymore. And I was like, I'd rather be alone than continue, because it was abusive in all forms. It was mental, emotional, physical, all types of different abuse. And
It's yeah, it's so valuable for you to share this, and thank you so much for doing that. So brave of you. I think that often, like, it's not that we don't even see like that you have a bag, but people don't understand what it is living with a condition like that, and all the mental and emotional baggage that you're carrying day in day out, and how that affects you emotionally as well. And we all, I believe really that we can all heal ourselves, but it's also a process and it takes time, right? And like you said, everything needs to be aligned for you to be ready to go through that journey. And I'm very happy and very proud of you for
thank you.
having done that, right? For standing, for, because that was part, I can imagine there was a massive part of your healing, right?
It definitely was, and that's sort of when the blog really came into fruition, or the idea really became, yes, I can do this. Because before, any ideas I had about anything, not just blog, but life, anything, it was wrong for him. It was wrong for him. You can't do it. You're not good enough. You're this and that. Do you think people are actually going to want to know what you have to say? Like, it was just, anyways, like I said, we're not going to go into all those details, but essentially it was like, I always second guess, even though I knew I had to do something, but it was always, my self-esteem just wasn't there. I had not dealt with my own insecurities even before him. And then that just projected into a whole nother level. So, even though that happened, and yes, he did that to me, but I have to take responsibility, my part in it. And my part was that I didn't have that self-love first, because if I did, I would have never continued with that relationship. We would have never gotten married. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
so it's like, this is my speech to other people to say, even if these things are happening to you, you deserve love. You deserve, like, these things, it doesn't make you less of a person. It does not.
Yeah, I think that is so important. So easy for people, like in the cancer world is the same. People just sit there, why me? Why me? Why do I get cancer? Why me? And for me, it was, I could see as, 2 + 2 is 4. I needed to change me. I needed to take 100% responsibility if I wanted a second chance in life. Turning up to chemotherapy was not going to be enough. I needed to change it all. My emotional state was a massive part of it. Like, I got there to having cancer at 38 years old, of not having anybody in my family, an extended family with that. not just by chance or by bad luck, like the doctors told me. I needed to take 100% responsibility. And I think that is so hard for people to come to terms with. Like, we talked a little bit about self-love before we push play, right? We're talking about like, what's the definition of self-love and self-care? Can you just share with people a little bit, like, what did you do like to really achieve or starting the journey of your inner healing, right? Or like really all of the things that you're not just turning up to, doctor's appointment and expecting them to save you, right?
Yeah, I think for me, it definitely was going back to trying to figure out who I was, and not what other people wanted me to be.
Yes.
And those expectations of what they thought was good for me or what they thought I should be doing. And that goes, like way back, like that idea of like pleasing and I'm a good girl and da 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 da, and
Traditional,
and so,
cultural, and being accepted and feeling that you want to belong.
Exactly. And I think I actually saw on one of your posts as well is like, feeling like you don't fit into what's happening, right? And
I'm
so
going to do a challenge next week or the week after just about that. And it so resonates what you're saying. Like when you say it goes back to childhood, right? It goes back to us trying to be who we don't necessarily want to be. And we don't even get a chance to find out who we want to be because the path is already set out for us, especially for me as a girl in Brazil, right? I don't know if that, tradition came with your Portuguese parents, even though you're in Canada, the tradition came along, in the suitcase.
100%. The difference is my parents have morphed as well. And I think the journey was together, especially I would say with my mom.
Yeah.
My dad too, but I would say especially with my mom. And I think like, it's not a negative thing. It's just what they knew.
Yeah.
And the thing is when we're enlightened, when we start seeing that in ourselves, we have to break the cycle.
Yeah.
And I don't mean that in a negative way. I just mean like, like society projects all this stuff on you. It's not just like parents, sure, your circle, they that definitely has influence on you 100%. But it's the society thing. And I can't just blame all on this cultural stuff, but it was like, let's be honest, you look at, I mean, now it's starting to change a little bit, but like, what is this body, expectation, especially on women, but on men too. Yeah. But what's this body expectation? You have to have like zero issues with your face. You have to be like this perfect body and it has to be this type of body. But don't you notice like throughout the decades, like in the 60s, you had to be like thinner, like really thin with no like curves or anything. Then the next, the decade after that, it's like, okay, we want voluptuous and this. Yeah. For women, and again, men too, but like, especially on women, it's like, if you're this, then you're good. If you're this, you're not. And then you add the element of like, people that are going through things that they have zero control over. Yeah. Like some of this stuff, it's not like I asked to have this HS. No. Are you kidding me? Of course not. No. But those things start affecting your inside, your feelings about yourself, because like, well, I'm never going to do this. Cause like, like I was talking about the career that I wanted to get into. I mean, I love sports, I loved art and all this other stuff. And I loved, business and stuff, but I really loved performing. I loved singing. I did a lot of that. I loved performing arts. I acted, and I got, somebody from one of the colleges wanted to give me a scholarship, and that's where I wanted to go into some sort of form of that artistic performance. Whether it was in front of the screen or behind the screen. But I was like, there's no way anybody's going to hire me if they know that like I have to go to the bathroom all the time. If I have these scars, there's no way they're going to hire me. So I started diminishing any kind of talent that I had to get into it, because I was like, well, there's no point. Which is, and then I started
like when you explain it, it looks so simple, right? Like you basically stop like going after your dreams, you know, because of the way that, you know, there's societal pressures, you know, just
right.
and it's like when you talk about it, it's so simple, but we know it's not simple, right? We know it's not simple, but it's just, it's so clear to see it from the outside, right?
Mhm. It's true, and all the like that's just my experience, but I know others have other things. Like I mean, when I knew that I wasn't going to go into that field anymore and I was going into something else, I was still like, I remember being sick and trying to go through my exams, and I was just like, I have to get through this. And nobody knew I hid a lot of my stuff. And only recently have I been more open about stuff. Recently, like in the last like 7 or so years.
Yeah.
But all of the early stages of my life, I said nothing. So anything that I was struggling with to be normal, nobody knew how much energy it took. The anxiety that I had when I was in an exam and I had to go to the bathroom, I'm like, oh my God, they're not going to understand. And I'm like sweating from like stress and like pain. And
Yeah.
I was just like, have to get through this because they're not, you know, I need to get some sort of degree or something. And it was just, and I know others go through that in a different, similar and probably different ways, where it's these anxieties, you know, like even like things like I remember, you know, we wanted to go down, we would go over the border and to go shopping in the States, right? I would do research ahead of time on what mall I would be going to or whatever. So I knew which washrooms and
Wow.
where things were situated, just so that I would feel comfortable enough, because I never wanted it to stop me from other things that I wanted to do, because already it had stopped me from other, you know, other elements. So I was like determined. So I'm like, no, I'll do it. But I
Yeah.
had to do the research.
And
So I
was this like when you were suffering with the Crohn's before this operation? Was it?
oh yeah.
Yeah. And that's, isn't it like crazy how used we get to our symptoms,
Yeah.
like
Oh
with our
yeah.
pain? Like, you know, like when I look back at, you know, I can almost like go back to embody that person who was me, like the old version of myself before the cancer, you know, waking up exhausted, you know, going to the toilet many times, going for one meeting after another, you know, not missing one day of work, even though I was growing a cancer inside me, and just, you know, going through one thing after another. And I really feel a lot of compassion for that person. And when I see people around me doing that same thing, it's so hard for me not to say anything. But I got so used to that physical, it was physical pain, right? I was physically
Oh, yeah.
uncomfortable, was physically horrible.
Yeah.
There was no joy in it, but I got used to it.
Yeah. And I think, like, at least in my experience, I won't speak for others, but in my experience, I felt like I had to prove something,
Mm.
that these conditions were not going to take everything away from me. So I was that much more determined. So when I was sick, I was like, no, I'm going to power through. Even though like somebody else would be like, I just need a sick day. I'd be like, no, I can't do a sick day because that means it's going to take over. And that means that's going to, and you go down that cycle. So you have this thing. And for me, I had this, like, I had to be perfect,
Yeah.
or try to be perfect in everything that I did,
Yeah.
because I felt less. So I felt like the only way to be equal to somebody who's normal and doing life, and of course this is my perspective, that doesn't make, you know,
Yeah.
other people are going through
Yeah.
things too. But in my perspective, it was like, I have to be good at this, all these things. I have to be a good daughter, a good wife at the time. I had to be like good at my job. I had to be good at art. I had to be good at this. I had to be good at sports. I had to be athletic. You know, like, it was just nuts to even come up to an equal playing field. So people would look at me and be like, oh, it's okay. And I never wanted to tell people what I was going through, because I didn't want them to go, like, when I was at work or whatever, I didn't want them to come to be like, oh, Cristina is pretty good at that for somebody who has this. I didn't want that label.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you want the acknowledgement, you know, somebody to understand the effort that it takes to do what we were doing, even getting out of bed for people that, you know, for yourself going through cancer or going through, you know, going through a flare up with Crohn's or whatever, the energy it takes to even open your eyes and get out of bed is huge. Where others might be like, sweet, the day's ready, let's go. Grab your coffee, grab your tea, whatever, and I can go on with the day. With us, it's like, you know, or people going through that, it's this energy, it's this mental focus. I need to be like, okay, I can do this. It's okay.
This so resonates with what you're saying, like the whole thought of wanting to be perfect. Like I didn't know that I was growing a cancer inside me, but I felt that, working as hard as I could and pushing myself, I was, achieving that, perfect mom, perfect wife, perfect employee, perfect this, perfect that. And within that process, I almost killed myself, right? Like literally, because my cancer had already spread to the lymph nodes. So it was a step, one step away from being stage 4, right? I was very lucky that it was. And so, even though like not having a known condition to myself, I still had this pressure of, like I want to be perfect. And I see so many people like, doing that outside, and that, like you said, there's so much suffering inside that, but you don't want to share. You don't want to be that person that says, I wasn't going to go to the doctor and say, hey, I'm a mom and I work and I'm exhausted. I mean, who's going to care, right? Of course you're exhausted. You're a mom and you work full time. That's normal. Just carry on going, right? So I never went to the doctor and I never said that, but I was beyond exhausted, and on the flip side, after I had cancer, is one of the worst things was for me to deal with was when I told people, when I was in front of them physically, and I said, I'm going through cancer treatment, or I've just been diagnosed with cancer. I could see their faces planning my funeral, like literally in front of me. And then I had to take over and console them.
Yes.
Like, oh, don't worry, I'll be okay.
Be empathetic to that.
Yeah. And I was just like, you know what? I am not doing this. So that's when I decided to self-quarantine myself. And I spent all the time doing my chemotherapy at home and being very selective of the people that I allowed into my life. Because that was, that self-pity, like when you're saying like people look at you, or poor you, I really didn't need that.
Yeah, it's a fine line. I think we've talked about it on the challenge and stuff. If people don't understand, really understand, you don't want the pity. You don't want it to be like this sick person. You don't want to be like, well, I'm not even going to invite her to do this because I know she has no energy. I'm not even going to put it. And you feel secluded in a way. And then you have the other part of you that you want to say and have somebody feel what you're feeling.
Yeah.
You got to know. And that's where that community comes in. And that's where, we talked about, the tribe comes in. You want somebody to understand, not have the pity, but understand.
Yeah. And with all due respect, like even when you go to the doctors, like unless they have gone through it.
Yes.
I had somebody who had gone through it and she supported me via text. And it was an amazing support because she had gone through like 12 months previous to myself, the treatment. And when I used to text her and say, hey, I'm having this, side effects, she'll be like, oh yeah, I had this, I had that, and I remember her saying to me, a really funny story, after the first chemotherapy session, her doctor said to her like, hey, it's going to be a bit, challenging, go home, like rest. And she came back to him, like for her second dose and said, you know what, you should have a go and you let me know how fine is this. You just give it a try. And then you come and talk to me about it.
Yeah, it's true. And, and sometimes like, I know people want to support you, and the people that care about you, they want to support you. And sometimes I think they just don't know what to say. And I get that. Like, I have compassion for that side too, because they're seeing a loved one suffer, and they want to console and they want to fix and they want to do something, but they don't know how to do that. So sometimes the things that come out are not quite, when the recipient, the person that's going through it, it doesn't always help.
Yeah. Totally.
And I'll give you an example is like, my dad's a very no nonsense kind of person. There's no like, he loves me very much. And, he's, we're close and we chat and, it's not like one of those fathers that's not engaged or anything. However, he's a very no nonsense, like, you got this, you're strong. It's no big deal. Other people have it worse than you. And, I know what he was trying to do is like, try to pep talk, but I'm like, okay, you're telling me this. I'm at the hospital with an open wound the size of like I think it was about the size of like a softball, completely open wound with a vac machine stuck to me. Nothing was healing, and him telling me this, and I'm like, are you got to be kidding me? Do you want me to cry? Like, I can't handle this, you know? Or when people are like, oh my God, you're the strongest person I've ever known. And it's like a part of me, I love that. I love that people think that I'm a strong person, but it doesn't give me the opportunity or the platform to have those days where I need help. I'm not strong today. Yeah. And I always felt like I had to put up this front even when I'm not. And yes, I'm a strong person, 100%. I am. I know that about me. I'm strong. I have great willpower. Some people might say stubbornness, whatever you want to call it, but you have that. But I have those days where it's like, I need to be just by myself, and I need to have that element of like, it's just a bad day. But I felt like I couldn't say that to somebody, because they're like, if I said that, that meant that the one thing that I was good at, well, in my mind at the time, the one thing that I was good at, people like acknowledged about me, I was going to lose that too.
Yeah. I think it's it's an interesting balance to find and to come to terms with. Like for me, like these days, if I get tired and if I'm at home with my husband and doing something with the kids, I am very good nowadays to say, that's it, I've got to sit down. Like, which before I would never do. I would keep pushing myself. So now he knows that if I'm saying this, I mean it. And, it took me a long time to get here, because I've never allowed anybody to look after me, because I always needed to be that strong person. But during treatment, I had to, because some days I could barely get out of bed. So I had to allow him to look after me, and I had to be vulnerable and to come, to be comfortable with that. So it took me a long time to get there, but I think it's a learning process as well, right? Like to really find that balance within us, and find like that you can be comfortable in that space as well, which is important.
Yeah, you have to like I completely empathize with that and completely relate. I still sort of sometimes have a hard time with it, but I'm a lot better, is allowing people to help me.
Yeah.
Because I was independent the moment I came out of the womb, and I, with these things, I just didn't want it to be, I didn't want to be a burden on anybody. And I wanted to know that I was strong enough to handle everything. And so I think I handle it that and more. And so that expectation of myself was so high. But what I want, like what I learned and what I hope to project to others that are out there that are feeling this way is, you are still independent if you need help sometimes. You are still strong enough if you ask for help sometimes.
Yeah.
You are still,
you're not worse
strong.
than,
you need to sit down for 2 minutes, or an hour or a day. That's okay. I grew up, and I'm sure you had the same thing, grew up where it's like, if you're not doing something, you're lazy. And then the relationship that I was in with my husband, my ex-husband, it was like, I was always on. I could be like, have been post-op, I still am seeing the nurses, and if I didn't have dinner on the table, I was a useless wife. Like, it was just, and then that just shakes you, And so, but it's okay. And now I'm okay. I'm a lot better at saying, like, I need my moment. Like, I can do all this stuff on this day, but you know what? On Sunday morning, I'm going to need it. I can't do it. I'll say no, because I wanted to please her. I wanted to be there for everybody. I wanted this. And so, but now I'm like, nope, I'm going to be, I'm at home. Nope, I'm busy.
Is that constantly race to prove yourself, right? That's constantly like, it sounds like we had similar upbringings that, you have to constantly be proving yourself. So if you're not doing something to prove yourself, then you're less than, or worse, weak or whatever.
Yeah.
But
or lazy.
Lazy. Or lazy, straight lazy. So wait,
cleaned the house and made dinner. What the hell?
No, just after op. Oh my gosh. So in your kind of inner healing journey, like what did you start like how did you start creating your own path towards healing, like after that surgery, which, was probably massive. Now you mentioned a little bit of diet. So you just kind of start doing your own research, or how did that?
Actually, it was when so it was the second to last surgery that I had when they removed the cancer of the rectum. Yeah. And so the site wasn't healing. So they tried a lot of things. They tried a vac to try and heal it, and nothing was working. And at that point in the hospital, so that was to do with the cancer and Crohn's. But at that time, I was finally diagnosed properly with HS. And so for me to focus on something and not focusing on, because they were saying you're going to be in the hospital for like 6 months or more with this thing, that nothing's happening. You might have to do another transplant type surgery of like taking tissue from another part of my body and transplanting it into there and doing skin grafts. And I was just like, oh my God, like it was just a huge, like, I can't believe this is happening. I already had the bag. I already had like, 8 other surgeries under my belt. I'm like, I can't. And
yeah, I'm strong, but not like that.
And the actual is happening. And so so when they gave me the diagnosis of HS, I was like, in my mind, I was like, I can focus on that.
Yeah.
So I was like, I'm going to find out what this is about. I'm going to, so I got like Wi-Fi, I got my, asked my mom to bring my laptop, like all this stuff. So I started researching. That's what I did. I focused on research. And then I started seeing that some people started healing with diet change. And, this person brought out a book about it. So then I bought the book. So I was reading the book. And so while I was in the hospital, I put myself on a diet.
Yeah.
And I don't mean a diet, lose weight diet. I mean a diet of like, not that I was never heavy on sugar, because my father, and there's a family history of diabetes as well. But I already didn't do too much sugar, but I eliminated it completely. Yeah. And then I went gluten-free. I went dairy-free. I started taking away nightshades at that time, and because they're inflammatory. Yeah. And so when I started doing that, about a week or 2 weeks in, they started to see healing.
Wow, that gives me goosebumps.
It's like
a week or so.
Machine. Yes, because nothing. So what was happening? This is what I think was happening. They never really said yes. Go, yeah, you're right. No. But I think that they knew I was right. Yeah. Because and FYI, I must say that the hospital system, like, they don't focus on nutrition, and the food that they give you is crap. If it wasn't, thank you that my mom came every single day and brought me food. The morning it would be protein shake, and then it would be like gluten-free, something. It would be like a higher protein, because protein helps, healing, promotes healing. And so I started, like, thank God that they brought that. And that's what it was. It was like about 2 weeks when I started changing that. It was slow, but they started finally seeing changes. And it was that, the elements in my body that was producing not producing the healing. And it was because it was also fighting that other stuff.
Yeah. It just boosts the immune system, and the immune system can finally start healing, right? Instead of like just trying to be working on overdrive, right? Like they can't keep on top of the inflammation. So when you say protein shakes, are you talking about like avocados and things like that, or actually pap?
I used a protein powder. Yeah. But the protein powder was, I never liked, I always did the research on it. Yeah. And of course, I didn't want whey because I was doing no dairy.
Yeah.
But I started like doing the research, and I wanted to find something that was very natural, and nothing that had fake sugar flavor. 1, 2, no, 3, 4, 5. Yeah. So I actually I have had a couple in the time that I've done it. but I would say the best one that I liked, it was this Organica one. And then also
based on peas or something like that, or
yeah, and now it's complete. It's just pumpkin seed powder
wow,
that is very high in protein.
so
And
very
then
much plant-based type of like diet that you went on, like to try to heal, or not really?
no, I'm not 100%
Yeah.
plant-based, but I haven't had gluten and dairy, and I was nightshade free for like, okay, so I've been gluten and dairy for about 6 years now. But sorry, I say gluten free and dairy free for about 6 years now. And nightshades, it was about 4 years.
Mm-hmm.
I was. Actually, it's just recently that I started introducing, but I started working with a traditional Chinese medicine doctor because I've had a flare up with HS and they wanted to do surgery on me again, and I refused. And I told them that I wanted to try and heal it with natural.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've been doing that for the last few years, just natural. So I haven't been on any medications. It's all been like foods and herbs and natural supplements and things like that.
That's amazing. It's a little bit of a trial and error as well, isn't it? I think that each of us, like we are made with a different formula, right? Like obviously there's some common things that you read in every book, right?
That's
right.
Right.
Like take the sugar out, any processed meat, processed foods out, things like that. But I think that, it takes time, doesn't it? Like people, when I look at my journey, I spent 38 years abusing my body. I've only been healthy in the last 2.5 years. You can't expect that you'll solve all the problems in 2.5 years.
Yeah, and doing stuff naturally, it takes a little bit longer, but you're starting to work on the root issue.
Yeah.
Versus like in Western medicine, it's like, okay, what do you have? Oh, you have a rash. Here's some ointment.
No.
They're not saying, why do you have the rash? They're saying, cover the rash.
Yeah.
And that's obviously very superficial or whatever, but that's what happens. Like when you get these like different reactions on your body, and it can come out like, whether it's, it's diabetes, whether it's like Crohn's disease or whatever, there's a root thing that your body is either lacking or allergic, or, there's some element in there. And so it's trying to find that. And even people that have HS or Crohn's, or, what works for that person might not work for you. So you also like, yes, I think on the broad spectrum, it just makes a lot of sense. Processed food, don't do it. It's because it's not only about, these diseases, it's cancer causing. Processed sugar is more addictive than other, street drugs.
Yeah.
And it can cause a lot of issues
in the long term. I know. It's hard though to convey that message when people, think that they are just, eating this type of foods and but I'm not sick, I'm not in hospital, like I haven't got a problem now, but obviously when you go through something like I've been through and you've been through, it's different because we have already gone through that, and we understand, and we have suffered the consequences. I think that, the more I look around, I think there is a lot of like, shortcut solutions being sold out there, and people just obviously, we have a tendency to go like, well, what if I lose 10 kilos in 1 week, it's much better than if I try to lose 10 kilos in 6 months time, like that kind of, and I think people lose track of, what's going to work for the long term and become sustainable and really add value to it.
That's what the society is right now. And you can do that. You can think about it in different elements, but it's that instant gratification.
Yeah.
It's that, give me the pill, I want it over in 2 weeks. It's not the journey of it. And I want it to be like, when I was 9 years old and I had what had happened to me wasn't something that I had done, or others. It's not like, oh, you were eating too much sugar and that's why you got it. It's not that. It's your body is either lacking or has too much of something, and that's the symptom. What it is, it's moving forward, finding out what that is.
Yeah, which is a long time, right? Like from 9 years old, like you're saying, it's a long time.
That's right. So I don't want it to, like what we're talking about, taking responsibility and all that stuff about your health. But what sometimes some of these things that happen to you, it's a gene thing. It's like the elements come together, but we have to think it's like, could be an allergy that's coming out this way. So autoimmune, you know, like if people have an autoimmune, they have an issue, but it could be targeting one particular like organ or whatever it is, right? But what it is, what goes forward is like those other things, the processed foods and all that are what feed to make it worse. So you could have that element in your body, but it's a triggering, something is triggering it to come out this way.
Exactly. Yeah. It's the accumulation of it, isn't it? Which is as well, you know, there's not much research because, you know, each person is very difficult as well for them to research because the diet, you know, when it concerns diet, people can eat different things and it needs to be something very controlled for them to show the results. So Cristina, tell us like what kept you going? You know, you were so bubbly, motivated, positive, strong, you know, and I know you mentioned that, you know, in the other videos that I watched now from you, like saying that, you know, when you were in hospital, we would, you know, doctors were asking you to go and speak to other patients who had just got a bag and they were very upset and depressed about it. And you were there, you know, trying to support them emotionally. I mean, what kept you going?
I think, you know, I've always had a positive attitude about things. I think that's, you know, you have a choice, you know, like you can wake up and be like, oh my God, this is going to be a shitty day. And it's going to be a shitty day.
Yeah.
Anything that happens to you is going to be shitty. You can pick. Yeah. And I chose the other side because I didn't want my conditions, what I was going through, to dictate my whole life.
Yeah.
I also saw the things that have happened to me. Yes, they were shitty and they were difficult to go through. However, I chose, and I really believe that it was a gift. It was a gift because I take life I see life in a different perspective. The depth of what I see, what life can be, is different than others who have never gone through that, right? And so when others are stressing, and everybody has stress in their life.
Yeah.
But sometimes it's that, you know, that hustle of life that people are stressing about, where I now get to see that that's not the end of the world, really. And so I think that's what kept me going. And this time where I could have died, you know, and I don't want to sound like it's dramatic, but it was a very big portion where it kind of was like, you know, you could have gone, like, why are you still here so many times? And this is not just like somebody nudging you and you're, you know, having a drink and people are like, oh my God, you could have died. And it's like, no, this is like from physicians that were like, how the heck, like scientifically and physically, how is this possible? Yeah. So I never wanted to take that for granted. Yeah. And I just love the people, you know, I don't know. I find like I want to experience so much, and I never wanted to let that stop me from. I want to see other cultures. I want to go travel. Yeah. I want, you know, I find, you know, happiness and things like, I love going to a football match, like a soccer match, or going to a ball field. And, you know, like, I like those things. I like going to see, you know, choirs perform and being with my friends and my family, like hanging out and having a barbecue. I have so, like, it makes me happy. And so I think that's what kept me going, because I didn't want to lose out on that. And, you know, if I dwelled on the hard things that were happening to me, it was taking away all the good things that could happen. And I think that's sort of how it just kept me going, because I never wanted to let it stop me from all these dreams that I had, all these things that I wanted to see, all these friendships that I wanted to make. But yeah, I think it was that. And I started, like I said, it was about it's also a gift, because all the things that, you know, would stress before, it's like, well, you know, this friend is not calling me. Like, I was young, right? You know, so you're like, oh, and we're going to do, and they don't like me, and da, da, da. And I was stressing about that. I'm like, what? That's such crap. It's like when you're yourself, and like, if you don't project yourself and then you don't have that connection. So why even bother? Who cares? Like, it doesn't matter. So I think that's like the morphing. And I think it comes with maturity. I think it comes with experience and learning and being mindful and turning in and really being, I don't mean always being serious, but being mindful of what's happening and really going in and seeing those things, right?
So what would you say, last question, if somebody has just been diagnosed with the HS, the hidradenitis
suppurativa. Yeah, it's a mouthful.
No, it's a mouthful. Or Crohn's disease, what would you say to that person, or even somebody who's just, had to go through, a surgery and coming out with a bag?
That's a very good question. What would I say? Well, I think I would say be, like, allow yourself that time to deal with things, like, you don't have to be on point all the time and that light bulb, and you don't have to show, and you can have those bad moments. However, I would say do everything that you can to look at the good things that are happening there, like, acknowledge what is happening and do the things that you need to do to make that better, but also go into the positive. There's always something positive, whether it could be something like, like, you're going through this and all of a sudden you make a friend who has the same thing, and you having that connection with that person could bring something else into your life, and I'm a very firm believer, that, these things that come into your life can bring, like, we don't know what we don't know, the possibilities, because, like me, now I feel like you're a friend, and if I didn't go and accept the challenge of speaking at the challenge, I would have never met you. I would have never had this wonderful opportunity to speak with you today. And like 6 months down, how would I have ever known that this was going to happen? I don't know. So, when you're going through these things, when you have the bag, when you get diagnosed with HS, when you get diagnosed with Crohn's or cancer or whatever, it's not trying to take away from how difficult it could be, but also looking at, we don't know what the possibilities are either. And you have that choice,
Yeah.
And that's what I would say, because, like, all these great things can happen in your life as well. These people can come into your life, these opportunities can come, things that you would have never even thought that was even possible.
Yeah, focusing on the gratitude and embracing the unknown, right? Like, really embracing the unknown. Yeah.
That's right. What's life about, right? We have to live it to the fullest. Yeah. Is it easy? No.
No.
And it's not easy for anybody. And I'm not, diminishing what anybody is going through, but it's like, everybody is going through something. And whatever comes our way, like, if you try to compare each other, like, yourself to somebody else, like, oh, their life is easy. We don't know what's really happening in their life. And if that person has never had these things, these obstacles to come, they cannot rise to the occasion either. So how can you even compare when the experiences are different? You can't. You can only do what what you have. So you have to be true to yourself. You have to be sometimes vulnerable, sometimes willing to speak up. And if there's that negative or whatever, you take it, like, you don't need to take it in.
Yeah, definitely. Amazing. So I am going to, add your details, as I mentioned, like, so people can reach out to you on Facebook, and I'll add the details of your blog as well, so they can contact you via blog.
I'm on Instagram as well.
On Instagram. Okay, cool. I'll add the Instagram as well. But thank you so much for sharing your story with us. I think it's so valuable. And, I do this because I hope that somebody that is going through, Crohn's or or the HS, they can come, they can watch this and just bring up some, hope inside, and some, like I say, focus on the being grateful, on the gratitude, and, by all means deal with it. But no, there is so much for us all to be grateful for, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And if anybody's out there and they're watching this video, contact yourself. If you have questions, I feel like I'm here to answer those questions if I can, even if it's like a chat and you just want somebody to listen or to understand, have an understanding that's going through the same thing, please reach out.
Beautiful.
Just please reach out. You're not alone.
Oh, thank you so much, Cristina. Thank you so much for being here. Take care.
We'll chat again, I hope.
Yes, definitely.
Bye.
Bye.